she whispered. "I'm not the woman I was." But the young cowboy chose her. The sun was slowly going down behind the wide hills of prairie. The sky was painted in soft colors of orange and pink. A light wind moved through the tall grass, making a quiet, whispering sound across the land. On a small ranch far from town lived a young cowboy named Ethan Cole. Ethan was known as a calm and hard-working man. He was not very talkative, but people in the nearby town respected him. Every day he woke up early, before the sun rose, to take care of his horses and land. His ranch was not big, but it was peaceful. Most mornings, Ethan could be seen walking beside the wooden fence with a cup of coffee in his hand, while the horses moved slowly across the field. He liked the quiet life. Out there were no loud crowds, no busy streets, only open sky and endless land. Still, sometimes the silence felt a little too deep. That evening, Ethan was finishing his work for the day. He closed the barn door and dusted off his hands. The wind was getting colder, and he planned to head inside soon. But as he walked toward the ranch gate, something unusual caught his eye. Someone was standing near the wooden post by the entrance. Ethan slowed his steps. At first, he thought it might be a traveler who lost their way. It was not strange for people to pass through the prairie roads. But as he came closer, he saw that it was a woman. She stood quietly, holding a small worn bag in her hand. Her clothes were simple, and her coat looked dusty from travel. Long strands of dark hair moved gently in the wind. She looked tired, like someone who had been walking for a long time. For a moment, Ethan simply stood there, unsure what to say. The woman noticed him and lifted her eyes. There was something different about her expression. It was not fear or anger. It was something deeper, like a sadness she had carried for a long time. Ethan walked closer and stopped a few steps away. "Evening," he said politely. The woman gave a small nod. "Evening." Her voice was soft and quiet. Ethan glanced toward the empty road behind her. "You traveling through?" he asked. The woman hesitated. Her fingers tightened slightly around the strap of her bag. "Something like that," she replied. The wind grew a little stronger, and the wooden gate creaked softly. Ethan noticed how tired she looked. Dust covered the bottom of her boots, and her shoulders seemed heavy, as if she had been carrying more than just a bag. "You come from town?" Ethan asked. The woman looked down at the ground for a moment before answering. "Yes, but I don't plan to stay there." Ethan studied her face carefully. Something in her voice made him curious. It sounded like someone who had left something important behind. A long moment passed between them. Then the woman spoke again, almost like she was talking more to herself than to him. "I'm not the woman I was," she whispered. The words were quiet, but the wind carried them clearly. Ethan blinked, slightly surprised. He had heard many strange things in his life on the prairie, but those words felt different. They carried a kind of sadness that was hard to explain. The woman seemed to realize what she had said. She looked away quickly, as if she regretted speaking out loud. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "You probably don't want strangers showing up at your ranch." Ethan shook his head. "Folks pass through here sometimes," he said calmly. "Prairie roads can be long." The woman gave a small, uncertain smile. "My name is Clara," she said. "Ethan," he replied. For a few seconds they simply stood there, while the evening wind moved through the tall grass around them. Ethan looked toward the darkening sky. Night would arrive soon. Traveling across the prairie after dark was not easy, especially for someone alone. He rubbed the back of his neck, and then nodded toward the ranch house. "Well, I've got a spare room," he said. "It's nothing fancy, but it's warm." Clara looked surprised. "You'd let a stranger stay here?" she asked. Ethan shrugged slightly. "You look like you could use some rest." Clara did not answer right away. Her eyes moved across the ranch, the barn, the horses, the open land stretching far beyond the fences. Something about the place seemed to calm her. Finally, she gave a small nod. "Just for the night," she said. Ethan opened the gate and stepped aside so she could walk in. As Clara crossed onto the ranch land, Ethan couldn't help but think about the strange words she had spoken earlier. "I'm not the woman I was." He did not know what she meant, but somehow, deep down, Ethan felt that Clara's story was far from simple. The next morning, the prairie woke slowly under a pale golden sunrise. A soft light spread across the wide fields, and the air felt cool and fresh. Inside the small ranch house, Ethan was already awake. Like every morning, he rose before the sun. He pulled on his boots, grabbed his hat, and stepped outside. The horses in the field lifted their heads as they heard the barn door open. Ethan moved calmly through his usual routine. He filled the water trough, placed fresh hay in the barn, and checked the fences along the pasture. But something felt different that morning. There was someone else at the ranch now. After finishing his work, Ethan walked back toward the house. As he stepped onto the wooden porch, he noticed the front door slowly opening. Clara stepped outside. Her hair was tied back loosely, and she wore the same dusty coat from the night before. But she looked a little more rested now. The tiredness in her eyes had softened. For a moment, both of them stood quietly. "Morning," Ethan said. "Morning," Clara replied gently. She looked out at the wide prairie stretching far beyond the ranch. The early sunlight covered the grass in a soft glow. "It's beautiful out here," she said. Ethan nodded. "Gets better at sunrise." Clara watched the horses walking slowly through the field. One of them trotted closer to the fence. "They seem calm," she said. "They like the quiet," Ethan answered. Clara gave a small smile. "I think I do too." For a while, neither of them spoke. The wind moved gently across the land, and the only sounds were the birds and the soft movement of the horses. Finally, Ethan gestured toward the barn. "I'm fixing the gate later," he said. "If you want, you can stay inside and rest." Clara shook her head. "I'd rather help," she said. Ethan raised an eyebrow slightly. "You sure?" Clara nodded. "I've worked before," she said. "Maybe not on a ranch, but work is work." Ethan thought for a moment and then smiled. "Well, horses always need water." Clara followed him toward the barn. At first she moved carefully, unsure what to do. But Ethan showed her how to carry the bucket and how to move slowly so the horses would not feel nervous. One of the brown horses stepped closer to her. Clara paused. The horse looked at her calmly. She slowly reached out her hand. The horse gently touched her fingers with its nose. A soft laugh escaped Clara's lips. "I think he likes you," Ethan said. Clara smiled, but there was still a quiet sadness behind it. The day passed slowly as they worked around the ranch. Clara helped clean the small porch, brought water to the barn, and even helped prepare lunch in the kitchen. She did everything quietly. She did not ask many questions. But Ethan noticed something. Every now and then, Clara would stop and stare out across the prairie, as if she were thinking about something far away. That evening, the sky turned deep orange as the sun began to set. Ethan built a small fire outside the house. He often liked to sit there at night after a long day of work. Clara stepped onto the porch and saw the fire glowing softly in the evening air. "Mind if I sit?" she asked. "Not at all," Ethan said. She pulled a chair closer and sat beside him. For a few minutes they simply watched the sunset. Then Ethan spoke carefully. "You said something yesterday," he said. Clara's eyes moved slightly toward him. "What was that?" "You said you're not the woman you used to be." Clara's fingers slowly wrapped around the warm cup of tea in her hands. She looked down at the ground. The fire crackled softly between them. For a long moment, she did not answer. Finally, she spoke. "Have you ever lived in a big city?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "Nope, never wanted to." Clara gave a small nod. "I used to live in one." Her voice sounded distant now. There were bright lights everywhere. Music in every building. Crowds of people walking down busy streets. Ethan listened quietly. "I used to sing," Clara continued softly. Ethan blinked. "Sing?" She nodded. "In small music halls and restaurants. People used to come and listen." She paused and stared into fire. "I thought that life would last forever." Ethan noticed a sadness returning to her voice. "But things change," she said quietly. "The city stopped feeling like home." She did not explain more. She simply watched the fire as the flames moved slowly in the dark. Ethan did not push her for more answers. Some stories took time, and Clara clearly carried many chapters she was not ready to tell yet. The night grew deeper as stars slowly appeared in the sky above them. The prairie was quiet again. But now, Ethan knew something important. Clara had not come to the ranch by accident. She had come there looking for something new. A few days passed on Ethan's ranch, and slowly the place began to feel different. Before Clara arrived, the ranch had always been quiet. Ethan worked alone, ate alone, and watched the sunset alone. The days were peaceful, but they often felt long. Now things had changed. Clara helped with small tasks every day. In the mornings, she brought water to the horses. In the afternoon, she swept the porch or helped fix small things around the house. She was still quiet, but her presence brought a gentle warmth to the ranch. Sometimes, when the wind moved softly through the grass, Ethan could hear her humming a quiet tune while she worked. It was the first real music the ranch had heard in a long time. One morning, Ethan was repairing a wooden fence near the road. Clara was standing nearby holding a small box of nails. "Hand me another one," Ethan said. Clara passed him a nail and watched him work. "You're good at this," she said. Ethan smiled slightly. "Been fixing fences since I was a kid." Clara looked across the wide prairie. "I guess ranch life teaches patience." Ethan hammered the last nail into place. "Out here," he said, "things move slow, but that's not always a bad thing." Clara nodded. She seemed to like that idea. Later that afternoon, Ethan rode his horse into the nearby town to buy supplies. The town was small, with a few wooden buildings, a general store, and a quiet cafe on the corner. People in town knew Ethan well. When he stepped into the store, the owner, Mr. Harris, greeted him. "Afternoon, Ethan," the old man said. "Afternoon." Ethan gathered the supplies he needed, coffee, flour, and a few tools for the ranch. As he placed them on the counter, Mr. Harris leaned forward slightly. "Someone told me you got a guest staying out at your ranch." Ethan looked up. "Yeah," he said calmly. "A traveler." Mr. Harris nodded slowly. "A woman?" Ethan paused for a moment. "Her name's Clara." The store owner thought for a second. "I think I remember that name," he said quietly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Mr. Harris did not say anything more. Instead, he simply rang up the supplies and handed Ethan the bag. "Take care out there," he said. Ethan left the store, but the conversation stayed in his mind. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Clara was sitting on the wooden porch steps. She watched the horses moving slowly across the field. The open land around her felt peaceful. It was very different from the crowded streets she once knew. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she could breathe. But deep inside, she also felt something else. Uncertainty. When Ethan returned that evening, he saw Clara sitting quietly on the porch. He tied his horse near the fence and walked over. "You been out here long?" he asked. Clara shook her head. "Just thinking." Ethan sat down on the step beside her. "The town was quiet today," he said. Clara looked at him. "Did anyone ask about me?" Ethan hesitated for a second. "A little." Clara gave a small sigh. "I thought they might." She looked down at her hands. "I don't want to cause trouble for you, Ethan." Ethan frowned slightly. "You haven't caused any trouble." "But people talk," Clara said softly. Ethan leaned back against a wooden post. "People always talk." Clara was silent. The sky above them slowly turned pink and purple as the sun began to set. "I think I should leave tomorrow," she said quietly. Ethan turned his head toward her. "Why?" Clara looked across the prairie. "This place is peaceful," she said, "but I don't belong here." Ethan studied her face. Over the past few days, he had seen how hard she worked. He had seen the quiet kindness in the way she treated the horses, and he had heard the sadness behind her words. "You're wrong," Ethan said calmly. Clara looked surprised. "Wrong. You belong anywhere you choose to stand," Ethan said. Clara stared at him. "But you don't even know my whole story," she said. Ethan shrugged slightly. "Maybe I don't need to." The wind moved gently through the grass around them. Clara looked back at the ranch house, the barn, and the open fields beyond. For a moment, something hopeful appeared in her eyes, but she still wasn't sure. Sometimes the hardest choice in life was believing that a new beginning was possible. And as the last light of the sun faded over the prairie, Clara realized she was standing at a quiet crossroads. She could leave the ranch in the morning. The next morning arrived quietly over Ethan's ranch. A soft golden light spread across the prairie as the sun slowly climbed above the hills. The grass moved gently in the morning wind, and the horses walked calmly across the open field. Inside the small ranch house, Clara was already awake. She stood near the window, looking out at the wide land. The prairie looked peaceful, just like it had every morning since she arrived. But today felt different. Today she had to make a decision. On the small chair beside the bed sat her worn travel bag. She had packed it before sunrise. The bag looked light, but to Clara it felt heavy with memories. For a long moment she simply stood there, watching the open fields. Outside, Ethan was finishing his morning chores. He carried a bucket of water to the horses and checked the wooden fence near the barn. He worked the same way he always did, slow, steady, and quiet. But his mind kept drifting toward the ranch house. Clara had said she might leave today. Ethan didn't like the thought of the ranch returning to the silence it had before she came. After finishing his work, he walked toward the porch. Just as he stepped onto the wooden boards, the door slowly opened. Clara stepped outside, holding her travel bag. Ethan noticed it immediately. "So, you're heading out," he said calmly. Clara nodded slightly. "I think it's the best thing to do." The morning wind moved gently between them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Clara looked across the ranch one more time. The barn stood quietly near the field, and the horses moved slowly through the grass. Everything about the place felt warm and peaceful, very different from the life she had left behind. "I don't want to cause problems for you," she said softly. Ethan leaned against the porch railing. "You haven't caused any." Clara gave a small, uncertain smile. "Maybe not yet." Ethan looked at her carefully. Over the past few days, he had seen how hard she worked. He had seen her kindness with the animals. And he had heard the quiet music she hummed while doing chores. She had brought something good to the ranch, something that had been missing for a long time. "Clara," Ethan said, "you don't have to leave just because people might talk." Clara looked down at the bag in her hands. "My past isn't simple," she said. Ethan nodded. "Most people's past isn't." Clara looked up at him again. "You really don't want to know everything?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Maybe someday," he said, "but not because I need to judge you." The wind moved through the tall grass around the ranch. Clara felt something warm grow in her chest, something she had not felt in a long time. Trust. She slowly set her travel bag down on the porch floor. Ethan noticed a movement but did not say anything. Instead, he simply watched her. Clara stepped off the porch and walked a few steps into the yard. The horses lifted their heads as if they recognized her. One of them walked closer to the fence. Clara smiled softly. "I think they've gotten used to me," she said. Ethan chuckled. "Horses are good judges of character." Clara turned back toward him. "You really think I belong here?" she asked. Ethan shrugged in his usual quiet way. "I think this ranch could use someone who sings while sweeping the porch." Clara laughed gently. The sound felt light and free in the morning air. For the first time in many months, the future didn't feel so uncertain. She looked out across the wide prairie again. The land stretched far beyond the fences, glowing softly under the rising sun. It felt like a blank page waiting for a new story. Clara walked back to the porch and sat down on the wooden step. Her travel bag remained beside her, unopened. Ethan stepped down from the railing and joined her. Neither of them spoke for a while. They simply watched the sunrise together. Finally, Clara spoke in a quiet voice. "You know, I meant what I said the first night." Ethan glanced at her. "What was that?" She smiled gently. "I'm not the woman I used to be." Ethan nodded slowly. "People change." Clara looked out at the prairie again. "And sometimes," she said, "change can be a good thing." Ethan tipped his hat slightly toward the rising sun. "I think it can." The wind carried the soft sound of birds across the open fields. The horses walked peacefully in the distance. And on that quiet ranch under the endless sky, two people sat side by side, ready to begin a new chapter neither of them had planned. A chapter filled with simple mornings, open land, and the chance to become something new.